The manufacturing industry can be a cutthroat place, and the race to the bottom hurts everyone. What's up guys, Ian Sandusky from Lakewood Machine and Tool back here again from Practical Machinist. Today on Shop Talk, we're going to be getting into why that race to the bottom, chasing that bottom dollar, hurts all of us. But before we do, make sure you like and subscribe below if you want to see more videos. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so today on Shop Talk, we're going to be pulling back the lens a little bit. I know on Shop Talk, we tend to kind of get a little micro in our focus and like to talk about, really granular shop management issues. But today we're going to kind of pull that lens back a little bit, look at the more macro scale, and talk about an issue that has always been a problem and is becoming a bigger one. But before we do, we got to kind of look at the background, a little bit of the history of the industry in the Western world, to kind of understand how we got here and why this is going to become a bigger issue and why we need to be cognizant of it. So for those of you who don't know, some of you guys I know who watch the channel are younger. Maybe you've only been in the trade for a few years. Maybe you are in school and you don't quite know the history of Western manufacturing. A little background for you guys, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, manufacturing was king in the Western world. You could say we actually had a predominantly manufacturing economy. These were the days where a guy could work in a shop, sometimes for his whole career at the same shop, have benefits, have a retirement plan through his company, he would have a pension, he or she. They could survive on one income with their family. They could have a house and a car and take vacations every year, all on that one manufacturing salary. Obviously guys, I'm not an economist, I'm not a historian. A lot of things changed unfortunately that did make this not a reality for a lot of us anymore, unfortunately. This is something we've been talking about a lot lately, are the wages and working conditions in the manufacturing industries. A lot of things changed that made that not quite so viable anymore. But a big thing that happened around the late 80s, early 90s, definitely in the 90s, was offshoring. Essentially what happened, guys, there were a lot of political changes, a lot of trade agreements that happened, the East opening up to the West, all these things you can spend a lot of time talking about if you want to. But essentially what happened was, companies in the West figured out they could take their parts, get them made in the East, and save a lot of money. East, even Near East, Far East, nothing against the East. Offshoring, typically we're talking about the Eastern Hemisphere. What was going on, guys, is shops were being forced to compete. So right now, if a shop at this time could pay their guys $20 an hour, which was a great living wage at the time, these big companies found out that they could go take their work, get it made overseas, where people didn't have the same labor protections, they didn't have the same standards of living, they didn't have the same safety protections, and these guys could be paid $1 a day instead of $100 a day. So the parts they were getting made here for X would now be made for pennies on the dollar overseas. Even at the time, I don't think there was any real allusion to the quality. I mean, there's been jokes about, that kind of manufacturing since it's happened. It's not great. But the price point was just far too good to turn up. If a company can still charge, if their part's worth $5 that they can sell it for, they used to have to pay $4 to get it made. Now they can sell it for $5 and get it made for 10 cents. It was too good for them to pass up. You can talk about the ethics of it all you want. There's been a lot of bad effects because of this. I don't think anybody really won except for the guys at the top. But anyways, it was a big issue and a lot of shops lost out on work. I mean, even just to share my company, Lakewood's story with offshoring, back in the late 80s, early 90s, pretty much through the 90s, we were almost exclusively a tool and die shop. So we would build progressive tools, stamping dies, for the big press shops in our area. So we would get the contract to build the die, and then we get the contract to build replacement punches and do the maintenance and the shim and sharpen, and that was all we did here. And then something changed. All of a sudden we realized we were sending out a lot of quotes for work and we weren't getting a lot of those jobs. And it turned out that some of the bigger press shops here figured out, to jump on this offshoring bandwagon, that they could spend $50,000 getting a welded together tool shipped here from overseas. And when I say welded together, I mean like the punch blocks were not screwed and doweled in. Everything was just welded into the shoe. out of who knows what metal. They could spend $50,000 getting that tool here, spend another $50,000 fixing it and actually making it work, you know, cutting it all apart and retrofitting it, and they would still save money over getting us to build it correctly the first time, you know, and be ready to go. And it's not like we were asking for more. It's not like our pricing was going up and up and up. It was not a problem that was exclusive to us. We had a price point that we were working towards, and then all of a sudden we were being forced to compete with 10 cents on the dollar, and we just couldn't do it. Fortunately, you know, we're still around today. We managed to pivot. We shifted into a lot of production stuff. We were one of the first guys in the area to jump on CNC manufacturing. So, I mean, we still do a bit of die stuff, and we continued to, but that work really died off. Like I said, guys, this was not just an issue unique to us. If there were 20 to 30 shops in my area our size, within 10 years of this starting to happen, there were maybe 5. Now there are maybe 7 because some shops are starting to come back. But this absolutely decimated the industry. And not only was this not an issue unique to us in our area, this was not an issue unique to anybody in the Western world. This was almost the time when the Western world shifted from a manufacturing economy to a service economy. You know, some manufacturing stayed here, but a lot of it did leave and never came back. A couple of things have happened since then in the intervening years, I guess. There have been more pushes towards quality, although a lot of the offshoring standards of quality have somewhat come up. There's still definitely a quality gap between a lot of Western manufacturing and offshoring. Another big thing that happened is standards of living have started to go up in a lot of these places, which is great. You know, people aren't getting paid $1 a day to do work anymore, which they shouldn't, no matter where you are in the world. So it's not as economical, you know, there's not that insane level of savings. In some cases there's still a lot, but it's not that crazy night and day level of savings. And thirdly, guys, you know, one of the biggest problems for the industry that's been a boon for a lot of shops in the Western world has been the supply chain crisis. A lot of these companies that shifted work overseas, all of a sudden in the last 2 years with the pandemic and all the things that have gone into it, have found out they can't get work done. They can't get things here. You know, it doesn't matter how cheap the part is if they can't get it here to assemble. So, you know, a lot of those factors have led to some of that work starting to come back. The reason this ties into the race to the bottom here, guys, is that a lot of these companies, and let's not talk about the big multinationals here, let's not talk about the giant corporations, because I don't have any pull with the giant corporations. You probably don't have any pull with the giant corporations. Let's just take them out of the equation for a second here. What I'm talking about are, you know, mid to large manufacturers, small manufacturers who still, you know, have a organization, not a board of directors leading them. The problem is a lot of these companies in this mid-range to large range, they've been conditioned now to pay X for their parts because that's what they were getting them made for overseas. Some of these companies have been doing it for so long that there's sticker shock when they come back. Some of these companies that have, you know, maybe only been around for 20 years or 15 years may have never done work with Western manufacturing. They may have been exclusively offshoring for the lifetime of their business. You know, it exists. So as this work is starting to come back, although we have price points we want to hit, a lot of these big companies are coming in and saying, no, we only want to pay this for this part. And we're having to face that issue. The reason this all ties back into the race for the bottom, guys, and why it hurts everybody is this is an issue that is starting to come up, and you know, it's been around, and it's only going to get worse as stuff starts to move back to the Western world. You know, for a quick example, guys, I had a guy approach me a couple weeks ago and say, hey, listen, I'm getting this part made for $1.35 overseas right now. What can you quote on it for me? And I had to take a look at it and started laughing, scratched my head a little bit, and I came back to him and I said, man, this is like a $10 part. Even in the quantities you're ordering, like, you know, I can go get forgings made for this, I can get castings made, but then I gotta pay for the casting tooling. By the time we're done, it's still gonna be 5 to 10 times what you're paying for that part in the quantities you want them. And he said, well, you know, thank you very much, but the conversation kind of ended there. It's not his fault. This is what he's used to getting it for. This is what his business model is built on. He needs to do some work on his end. It is what it is. But this is the kind of thing we're dealing with. the best thing we can do for our industry moving forward and as we deal with this is avoiding the race to the bottom. When I'm talking about the race to the bottom, guys, I'm talking about undercutting. That's the simplest way to put it, undercutting. What I'm not talking about is the general slight undercutting you're gonna get in business. That's just business, guys. You know, if somebody comes to me with a part and says, I'm getting this done for a reasonable price, you know, what I consider a reasonable price, what can you do for me? Yes, I'm gonna be looking to see if I can do it for 5% lower, or seeing if I can do it for, you know, maybe not a little bit cheaper, but maybe a little bit faster. That's just business. What I am talking about when I'm talking about undercutting and racing to the bottom is being asked to do work that you know is only gonna be a $40 an hour shop rate job or $35 an hour shop rate job when you are a $100 an hour shop and taking it. You know, here's the thing, guys. I know right now with the pandemic, there have been a lot of shortages. There's been a lot of shortages of work. There's been shortages of material. Things have been tight for a lot of people, myself included. There's been rough moments. And there's been times where you want to or have to take on lower paying work in order to keep your spindles turning, in order to keep your guys employed and keep the lights on. We all do the things we have to do to keep in business, guys. That is what it is. The problem is that if you're constantly taking on work that's $40 an hour and your business and shop is meant to bill based on, you know, your calculations at $75 an hour, you're not a $75 an hour shop anymore. You're a $40 an hour shop. Now that shop is gonna go, that's getting work done by you, is gonna go somewhere else and try to get it done for 35. And someone else takes that work for 35. And then they go somewhere else and say, hey, we wanna get it done for 30. You know, people will keep driving the prices down as far as they can. The problem is, you know, if you took that work on for $40 an hour, you're only making $5 an hour profit for your bottom line after you pay your guys, after you pay material, pay utilities, pay tooling. You know, what did you get out of that? For running your spindles for a week, you maybe made 200 bucks for your shop, for your bottom line. That's not gonna give you any room to give guys raises. That's not gonna give you any room for quality of life improvements, like putting in new lights or better machines or mist collectors. Essentially, all you're doing is just getting down to the bottom that you will possibly be able to do work for, and that doesn't help anybody. Think about it. If you have low paying work, guys, and you took it on when you were in a situation where you needed work, so let's say I took on that $40 an hour work, and then all of a sudden I get busy again. Let's say that customer comes back and wants more work done. How do I explain to them now that I need to charge $70 an hour for this work? All it does is drive your bottom line down, you know, and then the better opportunity is to go out and find better paying work instead of trying to deal with this, but then they're gonna go somewhere else and get him to do it for lower. If you see what I'm saying here, guys, that race to the bottom hurts everyone. You know, it becomes a situation where shop A up the street can't charge what they want to charge anymore in order to pay their guys well and keep their working conditions good, because shop B down the street has turned into a sweatshop and they're working for 30 bucks an hour. Well, that doesn't help shop B. You know, they stay in business kind of. Shop A goes out of business and now we're all having a lower standard of work. We all have a harder time getting the money we should be getting paid as employees, as employers, as shop owners. It just hurts absolutely everybody. So that's the issue. How do we solve it? The first step is choosing a shop rate that makes sense for your business and sticking to it. It's difficult because this means you are going to lose quotes. You are not going to get every job that you quote on. This is difficult, guys, especially right now. I get it when you're dealing with a situation where you're just trying to get work in the door. None of us as business owners, as shop managers, want to lose work. We're all conditioned that we want to win every quote that comes across our desk. The point is, if you're only gonna get work that's not actually making your shop great, like I said, you're no longer a $50 an hour shop or a $75 an hour shop, you're a $35 an hour shop. You need to choose a rate that makes sense, stick to it, and find work that makes sense at that rate. The second step is making sure that you're actually providing work that lives up to that price point. If you're charging $200 an hour, make sure you're shipping out $200 an hour parts. You see on the forums, on the Practical Machinist forums a lot, where guys will come on and say, hey, listen, I just put a Brother Speedio in my garage, or I put a Mazak lathe in my garage or in my shop. What kind of rate per hour do you guys charge for this? What should I be charging out that kind of work for? Very rarely do you hear them saying, you know, what kind of rate per hour should I be charging based on the kind of service I provide? Or what kind of rate per hour should I be charging based on the kind of experience I provide in dealing with my company? You know, I know guys with busted up machines in their garage that I will pay more for parts than the big fancy spiffy shop with the, you know, epoxy floors down the street, because that guy in his garage provides better parts and a better experience in dealing with him than the big spiffy shop down the street. You can charge a lot more if you're making sure that you're living up to what you're charging. If you are responsive, if you are, you know, making sure your parts are all in spec, you're not shipping out bad parts, that you're, you know, hitting your deadlines. These are all things that are going to make sure that you are worth your rate per hour, and you're going to be able to find work that hits that rate per hour. Lastly, my last step towards this is don't be part of the problem. Everyone is always going to ask you to reduce your pricing. That's just capitalism. That's the way business world works, and that's fine. You know, we all want to find a lower price for our products. I want lower material prices. My customer wants lower part prices. That's the way it is. But making sure that you are willing to defend your price points and increase them when it's necessary, rather than always capitulating and rolling over and just saying, fine, price break, price break, price break, is going to do you more favors in the long run and for the industry in the long run, rather than constantly trying to undercut other people and yourself in order to get something in the door. Am I saying should you never adjust your pricing ever? Absolutely not, guys. There are obviously going to be situations where you should give a lower price for something. Maybe your shop rate is $60 an hour or $70 an hour. This customer is ordering 10 months worth of work. Maybe you're willing to do 55 bucks an hour or 70 bucks an hour or whatever it is lower, which is lower than your usual rate, because you're getting 6 months of work out of that job. Maybe that makes sense. You know, there's always going to be scenarios. All I'm saying is do not constantly feel forced to lower your pricing in order to get work in the door, because all you're going to do is find it harder to make money, pay your guys well, and make sure we're all having good working conditions. Okay? I want to make sure you guys are leaving comments below here, guys, because it's really important that we have a discussion on these kind of topics. It's all nice for me to say my opinion on them, but some of the biggest insights I personally have had throughout talking about these things and having these conversations have come from the discussions in the comments below. I always read them, guys. I love seeing the conversation, and these conversations are really how we're going to make changes in the industry and build an industry we all want to see. So I'd like to hear your thoughts below on this issue. How are you combating the race to the bottom? What are some of your horror stories that you've been in dealing with other people undercutting you, or dealing with a shop that just wants lower and lower pricing? I'd love to hear it, because this is how we grow and this is how we learn, okay? Thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe below if you want to see more videos. You take care.